Now for today's Focus Report, we're heading to East Jerusalem, where tensions between Israeli settlers and the Palestinians they're trying to dislodge have been rising in the context of the war in Gaza. For years, settler organisations have been procuring homes belonging to Palestinians through the courts, which Palestinians say are weighted in favour of the Israeli settlers. We're going to watch the report in just a few moments' time, but now I'm joined on set by Claire Paccalin, one of the journalists who worked on this report. Thank you for joining us today, Claire. Could you just start by giving us an idea of how you chose to film where you did?
So we filmed in East Jerusalem, first of all in Sheikh Jarrah. That's the neighbourhood which is very well known for tensions between Israeli settlers and Palestinians. There are police everywhere, making it difficult for us to film, particularly in certain streets. They were very keen for us to move on quickly. They're really there to protect the settlers. They're not really under orders to protect the Palestinians, to the extent where we were trying to get into a settler's house and we were speaking to the people outside, and the police actually just walked into the courtyard of the house where they have a coffee sort of table that the settlers have put out for them, and the police just come in and out throughout the day grabbing coffee because they're pretty much there the whole time. So it's a very tense neighbourhood. We also filmed in the old city of East Jerusalem, and this really is clearly something which is, I mean, it's a hot pressure kind of, it's a pressure point. You know, all Christians, Muslims, Jews, they all have holy sites there, and the old city is very much an important place where we felt we really needed to film there too. Okay, well, thank you for setting the scene. Let's watch that report now.
Every house where you see a flag is one they've occupied. This is the house where we live. Higher up, there are the settlers.
Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood in East Jerusalem, a scene of constant tensions between Palestinians and Israeli settlers.
The settlers tried to take over as many houses as possible in Sheikh Jarrah. It's happened to several people in the neighbourhood. And also in the old city, a woman went out, and when she came home, there were settlers in her house. What right do they have? If you go to the Israeli courts, you won't win.
Is this your land?
That's Palestine here. It's our land, it's our pride. How can I not feel attached to it?
Just above their home, the settler organisation Natalia procured a house in order to place a Jewish family in East Jerusalem.
We rent this house under certain conditions. I can't help you because we signed a contract forbidding us to do interviews. There could be legal problems. Yes, I wanted to live here because the tomb of Shimon HaTzadik, the saint, is nearby.
Over the years, the Israeli government has tried to play down state involvement, portraying the issue as a real estate dispute between private parties. Laura Wharton, a left-wing opposition Jerusalem city councillor, says that's not the whole story.
The Jerusalem municipality and the Israeli government encourage and facilitate their going in by providing them with armed guards, private security people. There's a line in the Israeli budget for security in East Jerusalem, and it's something like, I think it's now over 100 million shekels a year.
The Israeli settlers who have moved into Sheikh Jarrah regard all of Jerusalem as their capital.
I don't see any difference between this neighborhood and another, in Jerusalem or anywhere in Israel. I rent my home from an organization. It buys apartments or wins legal cases. It proves that these houses have always belonged to Jews. Then they evict the Arabs from their homes.
14 mai 48, sous le portrait de Théodore Herzl, le fondateur du mouvement sioniste, David Ben-Gourion proclame la création de l'État d'Israël.
In 1949, a year after the State of Israel was proclaimed, a ceasefire line called the Green Line was drawn. It went right through Jerusalem, with Israel controlling the west and Jordan controlling the east. The neighbourhood of Sheikh Jarrah in the east was mostly lived in by Arabs. The few Jewish families living there were moved out by the Israeli government, compensated and given new homes. Then in 1967, after the Six-Day War, Israel declared the whole of East Jerusalem and surrounding Palestinian villages as its capital. It continues to occupy East Jerusalem and the West Bank. When Jordan was in control, many Palestinian families were not given the deeds they later needed to show property ownership. Since the 1970s, settlers have taken advantage of this bureaucratic grey area.
I think it's immoral and illegal because in many cases they're taking over land that is not Israeli land, and according to international law, East Jerusalem is conquered territory and it's illegal for Israel to settle its citizens.
To the east of the Green Line is Jerusalem's Old City, a tiny piece of land where Christians, Jews and Muslims all have holy sites. Settlers covet buildings across the Old City.
Here's my father's house, next to Al-Aqsa Mosque. The first settlers in 1967 who imposed themselves in Palestinian homes were here. In the middle of the Muslim quarter, which gives them access to Al-Buraq, the western wall.
Through the winding streets of the Old City, Miriam takes us to her small home overlooking Al-Aqsa Mosque, an important holy site in Islam.
Thanks to God, for us, this is paradise. People envy us for this place and that view. Recently, they took my friend's home. They moved in, they threw all of her belongings outside. They were backed by the authorities. We couldn't do anything. They covet these houses because we're so close to Al-Aqsa Mosque.
After the attack by Hamas in Israel on October 7th and Israel's deadly retaliation in Gaza, pressure on Palestinians in East Jerusalem has only increased. Jerusalem's City Council has given the green light to another settlement construction, further threatening the presence of Palestinians in East Jerusalem.
So, Claire, a fascinating report there, a lot to get our teeth into. I'd like to ask you how those Jewish settlers that we saw at the beginning of your report, how they're able to procure properties belonging to Palestinians in East Jerusalem.
So there are various ways. I'll name a few. First of all, there's going through the courts, which we mentioned in that report. Palestinians say that those courts are weighted in favour of the Israeli settlers. Often the proceedings are in Hebrew and not, of course, in their first language, in Arabic. And, of course, the settler organisations, a lot of them are funded by donations in the US. They have a lot of money. They can pay for expensive lawyers. And all this really dates back to the issues of these Jewish families claiming that their ancestors, their relatives in the 30s and 40s lived, for instance, in Sheikh Jarrah. They say they had families who lived in Sheikh Jarrah before the creation of the State of Israel. Now, what happened in the violence leading up to the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, which of course is known as the Nakba for Palestinians, the catastrophe when many were displaced from their homes, they were actually resettled in Sheikh Jarrah, and the Jewish families who've been living there, they were compensated and rehoused by the Israeli government. And now they're coming back and saying, hold on, my great-great-grandfather lived in that house, it's therefore mine. Palestinians are facing the issues that when they were rehoused in Sheikh Jarrah, they were not all given the official documents, the deeds they need to show that they own those properties. And so they're finding themselves often in court proceedings where they're just not winning up against these Israeli settler organizations. There's also some of these organizations are offering vast amounts of money. We spoke to one woman in the Old City who told us that she's been offered a blank check for her 2-bedroom apartment in the Old City. And you can imagine many of these Palestinians are poor. They're deprived. They're living in very difficult conditions, and they're being offered vast sums of money for what's actually very small pieces of property. We also have just a general effort to wear down the Palestinians. And we saw this with our own eyes. Israeli soldiers, Israeli police often stopping, for instance, Miriam, who we saw in the report, whose home looks onto Al-Aqsa Mosque. She said that she's stopped all the time by the police. They check her shopping, they take a photo of her, they take a photo of the shopping, they make her wait while they send it off to be examined, and she sometimes has to wait 2 to 3 hours before she can get home after having done her shopping. She's also applied to the Jerusalem municipality, which is now right or far right leaning, asking to do maintenance work on her home. Not expanding her home, but just keeping it, sanitary and safe to live in. And every time she asks for a permit to do some kind of maintenance work, well, it's turned down by the Jerusalem municipality. And she says she feels that there's an effort to basically make it so that her home is no longer livable. It's unsanitary and that she's got no choice but to move out. So there are various ways, lots of different techniques and strategies at play settlers are using to evict Palestinians in their home. And there's just a few of them that I could mention for you.
And you, of course, filmed this report against a backdrop of the ongoing war in Gaza. Tensions intensifying clearly in recent weeks, you found.
Certainly, and we can see settlers becoming much bolder, some of them becoming violent. Already, the far-right government in Israel has been almost like a gift to settlers in terms of allowing them to take over more homes. And we have just seen, as I mentioned at the end of that report, another settlement construction project has been given the green light in East Jerusalem. So there's that. And also for settlers, it's what we have to understand is that for them, they think that the whole of Jerusalem is rightfully theirs. They believe in a unified Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and they believe that they can live anywhere there. I would like to end on a tiny glimmer of hope, some images that we filmed in Jerusalem just the night before we left. A diverse group, Christians, Jews and Muslims, who come together to volunteer, and they prepare food boxes for families who need it in East Jerusalem, food donations. And I'd like you to listen to what they have to say, because I think there's a little bit of hope in what they told us.
Assalamu alaikum.
It's going for needy people in East Jerusalem. It's a project that we're doing, Jews and Arabs together, as good citizens of Jerusalem.
One of the big problems is that people in Jerusalem and Israel, Palestine don't know one another, and they have all different kinds of stereotypes. But when they meet and they work together, then they realize they, all basically just want the same thing. They want to live in peace. They want their children to grow up safe and happy, and that's what we have in common.
مش بنآمن بالمقاومة المسلحة، أنا مآمن بالحل السلمي لأنه أحسن حل للقضية الفلسطينية. بس بنفس الوقت إحنا بالقدس كل جيل بيجي بعيش أصعب من الجيل اللي قبله. أبوي عاش أصعب من سيدي، وأنا عشت أصعب من أبوي، وابني راح يعيش أصعب مني. تدا لورا.
טוב, תודה לך. כל הכבוד. אוקיי, ביי ביי.
So Kamal's soundbite at the end wasn't translated. Let me just tell you what he said to us. He said he's Palestinian, he's against armed resistance, he's really for a peaceful solution. He says he thinks that's what's best for the Palestinian cause. But he also said at the same time, life is getting harder for people in East Jerusalem. He said that his grandfather had it easier than his father. He says that his father had it easier than him, and he's having it easier than his son. And it's just getting harder and harder for Palestinians.
Claire Paccalin, congratulations on the report. Thank you very much for speaking to us on set today. Claire Paccalin, you can watch that report on our website, france24.com.